Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart, and today I am joined by, well, nobody actually, because I didn't do anything other than this intro. I did the intro. So that's my claim to fame for this next little bit of content. Our marketing team, paired up my co-founder, Aaron Ross, and somebody who you might know in the industry, Collin. And they had a great conversation about the future of sales development, what it's going to look like for sales development reps down the road, how we get more leaders, how we earn a spot at the table. If you are curious about the future and you want to hear a couple of big guns share their ideas, have some disagreements, and work out, where are we going to see sales development go in 2020, then this is the episode to check out. So without rambling on anymore, I'm going to get out of your way, and here's the episode.
Welcome. This is actually a predictable revenue webinar. I have Collin here, Collin Cadmus. I'm going to talk about this interesting idea about, is the SDR model broken?
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I want to just start by saying thank you to Aaron. I'm excited and honored to be able to chat with you. We have a huge turnout today. It's a hot topic for me because it's something that I have seen happening over the last, let's say, 5 years of my career. It's something I talk closely with a lot of my friends who are VPs of sales, directors of sales, development, et and I'm seeing a lot of things change in the industry. And I want to preface by saying that I am mostly referring to, or I'm exclusively referring to SMB Outbound SDR with maybe a little bit of mid-market. My experience is not in the enterprise space. From what I hear, I think things are quite different there. I think the ability to have ROI on an SDR and enterprise is completely different. So I'm really talking about the SMB outbound space with maybe a hint of mid-market. And I guess I'll start, Aaron, by
by the way, when you say SMB, in your definition, because there's many, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, to me, SMB is $1,000 or less of MRR.
Okay, $1,000 less of MRR or 12,000 in ARR.
Right.
I'm just so used to like ACV, ARR.
Yeah. No, but yeah, generally, if we get over 12,000, if we're around 12,000 ARR, we consider that sort of mid-market. So that's generally what I'm talking about. I'm talking about transactional sales, short sales cycles, and yeah, products that will cost generally less than $1,000 a month in total MRR. And so I'll go with kind of how I came to this theory and where my head's at with it, and I guess dive into, first, let's hear from the audience. And after I share that, let's see if people agree. Let's see if people are experiencing the same things. And then I can start to dive into some of the things I'm thinking about to potentially fix it. And so the reason I reached out to Aaron and I thought this would be an interesting discussion for him is because he literally wrote the playbook that we all follow today. And I think it's interesting because, and I said this to him, is there's people in the space that will say predictable revenue's dead, predictable revenue doesn't work. And to me, I saw it as quite the opposite. I actually see it as it's worked so well that everyone is doing it. And that has made it incredibly harder, right? And so when we've gotten to this space now where literally every SaaS company is following this playbook, it's gotten so popular that tools like SalesLoft or Outreach have been designed specifically to make it easier for people to follow this type of playbook. And so what has happened, I think, is that people have become numb to the cold outreach, numb to being put into a cadence or a sequence. And it's to the point now that when a buyer like myself gets an email from an SDR, I know right away I'm in their cadence. I know I'm going to receive another email in 2 days. I know I'm going to get that voicemail tomorrow. And that's not the same reaction that I think people got 10 years ago from those types of outreaches. And so it's different, right? And so that makes it harder for the SDR. It doesn't mean the model's broken. It means we have to get more creative. And so everyone in this space has been talking about personalization, customization, and we know that we need to be doing more of that, right? And that's what everyone aims towards doing, because you have to stand out from all the noise, because anyone in a role like myself or whoever you're targeting, your ICP, we're getting so many of these outreaches. And so I think what that has turned into is it has actually changed the role. And so I'll go back a little bit into what I think has changed in the role, and what we're seeing, and why I think that that's ultimately leading to what we're hearing is roughly 60% quota attainment for SDR orgs, again, in the SMB space. So if the role gets harder and you have to get more creative and you have to be better at personalizing or customizing your outreach, you have to be engaging with people now on social as well. That's in mostly everyone's cadence today. It's no longer just make 100 cold calls, blast out, a bunch of emails, and you're going to get the same amount of responses week over week. It's getting harder and harder for that to work. And so that's okay, because there's things that we can do about it. And what we're seeing is that SDRs used to come in and you say, hey, you got 90 days to ramp up. We're going to put you on a quick ramp up, 3 months. And after that, you're at full ramp. And then you're going to crush the role for another 9 months. You'll be in it for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And then we'll promote you to AE. Right? That's been the general track that folks come into. And so people coming out of college, entry level, they're generally looking at SMB sales jobs. They say, I want to be an account executive, but you got to pay your dues. You have to start as an SDR. And I think that those days are behind us because the role has gotten so much more challenging. And the reason, again, this is my theory, the reason that I believe that organizations are struggling to hit 100% quota attainment is they're still expecting people to ramp up in 90 days and crush quota for 9 more months. But really, ramp up is looking like 6 to 9 to even upwards of 12 months in some organizations, because they have to be able to learn a lot more. There's a lot more tools they have to know how to use. They have to learn how to find the right data. They have to learn much deeper talk tracks, right? We're no longer just setting meetings and handing it over to the AE in order to convince someone on that cold call or in that email thread that they should even meet with you. You have to get deeper into the conversation. And to do that for technology companies, you need to learn more about your product, about your competition, about your integrations. And I just think you can't do that in 90 days anymore. And so that is where I'm seeing things change. And so I don't think the model's broken. I think the timeline of the role is what is changing. And if we can change the foundation of this 3-month ramp up going into 9 months of crushing it, and we can say that it's probably more like a year of ramp up and then 2 or 3 years of crushing it and really honing in on the skills, I think we can see the average tenure of the SDR orgs go up and their average output get away from that 60% and closer up to that 100%. And in order to do that, and the reason I'm making so much noise about this is because I don't think one company can make this change on their own. I think the industry needs to make the change, because if I have people coming and interviewing at AirCall and I say we're looking at a 3-year program here, and I'll put you into 6-figure earning potential in year 2, if they're getting offers from someone else who says we're going to move you up in 12 months, that's a problem, right? And that makes it harder. And so I think the change needs to happen everywhere. And I think we can start seeing, we can get back to a place where 100% quota attainment is the norm.
By the way, I muted myself because they found me. All the kids, there's like multiple kids, one bringing food, one's crying. The younger ones were like, "Where's daddy?" So saying this, I'm mostly on mute. It doesn't matter where I go. It's like the Pied Piper. But I'm very lucky. I'm very, very lucky. For those who don't know, we have 9 kids. We just moved to Edinburgh with the 5 youngest.
How old are they, Aaron? Or what's the range?
From 3 until 21. But here in our new house location, Edinburgh, that's from 3 to 10 years old.
Got it. That's awesome. Busy guy.
So, good question. I'll turn it back to you, though.
Yeah,
do you
sure.
think expectations very challenging?
Yeah.
Including time frame and the output levels they expect.
Yeah, and it comes,
quotas. If there's a low quota attainment, how much of that do you think is because they expect too high quotas? Period.
So that's something we're still working on figuring out here. But what we're seeing right now is that when our SDRs are getting closer to the 9 to 12 month mark of their tenure, they're starting to hit the quotas. So I don't think the quotas are necessarily too high, at least not in my org here. And we're going to do probably a big survey across Revenue Collective, and I think I may even put one together myself and blast it on LinkedIn and just try to get some data. But I don't think it's the quota that's the problem. I think it's how fast we're expecting people to get to that level of performance, because again, the job's gotten a lot harder. We used to just teach someone how to dial a phone and teach them how to send an email, and now they have to use all these different tools to research data, and not to mention there's a whole other point on that. I have another theory on, I think getting accurate data has gotten more challenging, even though the tools are more advanced and 10 times as expensive as they used to be. I have this theory that, average tenure of executives has changed a lot over the last 10 to 20 years, and people aren't staying at companies as long. They move in 2 years, and that just makes the data hard to get, right? And so half the data sources you're getting, the person doesn't even work there anymore. And in order to get the right data, the SDR has to really research. And the days of just buying lists and giving them to SDRs, it doesn't work. They have to really, really know how to research and find the right people. They have to go into LinkedIn Navigator, then cross-reference it to Zoom Info or Discover or whatever they're using to even just get the right contact info, make sure they're reaching the right person. My VP of marketing sent me a screenshot today that he found in Salesforce. His wife used to work at Handshake. She now works at LinkedIn. She's been there for a few years. And he sees that one of our SDRs was reaching out to her at Handshake this month. And she hasn't worked there in 3 years. And we have the best data tools that you can possibly get. And it's just, it goes to show that stuff's happening every single day. We're just not even reaching the right people half the time. And this is an SDR who's been in the role for 2 months, right? It takes a long time to even get to the point of where you know how to even get the right data. And then to learn how to say the right thing, how to craft the right email, how to personalize it enough to get their attention, how to target your ICP. This is not a 3-month training experience to get there. And so I think it starts at the top. It starts with investors and founders who want to build an outbound sales development org. And in their head, they think we're going to invest the money, we're going to hire the leadership, and in 12 months, we're going to start seeing results. It doesn't work like that. And I want to be challenged if people are seeing that it is working like that, because I'm seeing that you're on at least a 3-year journey to really build that org and get it to where you want it to be in most cases. But large part of the reason I'm on here today is to test this theory and get feedback from people and you as well, Aaron, and see what people think. Am I hitting the bullseye here at all, or am I completely off and I've got tunnel vision on maybe just what I'm seeing?
Well, like every topic, for some people it's going to be true, and for some people it won't. Yeah. There's a large range of variety of challenge for companies and markets. And I think there are so many companies that for many reasons have these exact challenges. And there's some that don't, but this is increasing because everything's getting busier, more competitive. Think about content marketing 15 years ago. You can maybe 20. Yeah. You could put up a blog. What John Miller of Engagio Marketo says is he could do a blog post and instantly be first page of Google. And he's like, nowadays it's impossible. He's been trying to be on the first page of Google for 4 years and can't get there. Yeah. Outbound's the same. So it's going to get more competitive.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to get harder. And so outbound works. You just need to be better.
Yep.
It is what we see, and working with companies, whether we're building remote teams for them or helping them fix their teams, is there's a lot more complexity, and it's very hard for companies to execute all the complexity well on their own. Yeah. And it does take a lot longer than they expect. I would say, 18 months. So I could see it being longer than that, depending on your market.
18 months to get some traction. Yeah. And do you say 18 months?
Regular revenue, to feel like it's the full sort of cold to revenue funnel. But
do you say 18 months to after you get the right leadership and you start hiring, or 18 months to I'm starting to look for sales leadership today, and 18 months from now, I've got the leadership, I've got the team, I've got the process, and I'm generating revenue.
Usually from when you start, if you start from scratch, it could be 18 months. That might be 6 to 8 months to have some sort of pipeline cycle where you're getting quality meetings.
Yeah.
And then another, 6+ months for the revenue part. And there's many things that can go wrong at times. So, it's not 3 months, it's not 6 months.
Agreed.
And the biggest risk factor for companies themselves is having the leader of the team in charge of executing is like their ability to execute. That's it. Not a surprise, and it's not different than any other function. But
no, and what I see, what I've seen in my last 2 companies is it's, first of all, it's so different at every company, right? And we try to hire people that have done it before, right? You always hear CEOs and ever they're recruiting, I need someone who's done it before. They did it before in a different environment, selling a different product to a different ICP. And you can even try to find something that's super similar. It never is. And so even when you hire the best leadership, they need 3 to 6 months just to learn the ins and outs of the business, because you can't rubber stamp, right? And you need to figure out exactly what works, the verbiage, the value prop, et cetera. And so all of that, I mean, you say 18 months, I think that's on the short side. I think that's probably for someone who's really executing almost flawlessly. I would, and I'm curious to hear from the audience too, but I would say on average, it's probably more. I think 18 months is a good target. It's probably a good, we should try to get there. But we should be prepared to probably not get there.
Yeah, I think you have to have a plan, but a lot of the problem is expectations. How long will it take? How much will it generate? Because again, and this is by the way true of life, because we're surrounded by all the success stories that get posted.
Yes.
Whether it's around career, life, love, whatever it is, selling companies. And so our minds are set with the wrong benchmark, because that when we see are people who start companies and sell them in 9 months. So this is another one. So
because no one talks about the failures, right? Your LinkedIn feed is flooded with the guys who raised their round at a record valuation and things are going great, but you don't hear what the end stories to most of those companies. And so I think people, you're exactly right? Everyone's benchmarking their expectation to the success stories instead of to the real average.
Yeah. So I'm going to just take a quick second. I'm going to try an experiment here. So we have a survey, and this is just a quick question. What's most broken? What's most broken about the SDR model today? If you can answer, and then Julia, if you can look through these, and if there's some conclusions, we'll have you jump on. So I think we'll leave this up for a few minutes while we talk. Now, keep my fingers crossed that this works. First time ever. Beta testing, alpha testing as we go. So so you have this theory too that it's time to discuss career SDRs. Now, I know they're out there. They're very rare.
Yes.
Very rare. How would you? Yes. And you said career SDRs as a parallel track to AEs.
Yeah.
Is it possible? How could you actually do that and make it work? What would it take? And I don't think we've seen that, but what would it take to make that work if it did?
Yeah. So I talked to someone the other day who is one of those few guys making, I'm not going to say his name or where he works, but he's at a top SaaS startup. It's a company everyone here knows, and he's making $300,000 a year in the mid-market to enterprise space as an SDR. He is in his late 40s, and he has no intentions in ever switching jobs. He's done it at multiple companies. He loves what he's doing. And so I really wanted to learn from him, what excites you about it? Why do you want to do it? And I agree with you that if there is a world where we start seeing more, career SDRs, I don't think it will. I don't think it's going to change the fact that a large majority of them are still going to want to become AEs. What I think needs to change is that people need to have an easier path to staying in the role. Whereas today in most organizations, if you want to start earning, decent money, you kind of have to move up, right? You don't really have much of an option there. And so to answer your question, what needs to happen? The number one thing is that the role needs to be able to earn more money, right? That's the main reason I think people move out of the role. And other people say things like you get burnt out, this and that. And it depends on the organization. I was in a full cycle sales role, and I know what it feels like to get burnt out. I got burnt out after 6 to 9 months. We were making 100 cold calls a day, 0 email. It was extremely transactional. And yes, if you're in a role like that, you are going to get burnt out. You can't do it forever. I get it. But if you're in a very strategic role, like I look at the SDRs at our organization here, and the conversations that they get to have with prospects are equally, in my opinion, equally as challenging, equally as fun as the conversations our AEs get to have. They're just having those conversations at the top of the funnel versus the bottom. And selling a product like this, I would argue to say that it's actually more challenging to have the top of funnel conversations because we're selling a commodity. We're selling a better mousetrap, right? And we're calling on people who have something in place already. And that's very different than a lot of SaaS companies where you're calling on people with something new that's not replacing something they already have. And so in our environment here, those conversations are very challenging. And so what needs to happen back to your question, what needs to happen to make that a possibility to be a career SDR, or maybe let's say career SDR. Let's also just say like a longer tenured SDR, right? Someone who's going to stay in there for a few years at least. Number one is the money. They need to be able to get the money. Number two is the respect of the role needs to grow, right? Today, if you have 4 years as an SDR on your resume, I don't think it's respected nearly as much as it should be when they go out for their next job. If they want to leave that company, if you can contribute to top of funnel and open up opportunities exceeding quota for 4 years as an SDR, to me, if someone comes into me with that resume, I think I respect it and value it far more than probably the average. So I think that needs to change too. The respect of the role, it should not be looked at as a stepping stone to AE. It doesn't mean it can't be a stepping stone to AE. But I think that the days of looking at it as just this junior, they're the lowest paid, they're the least respected, they're the most disposable people in the company. Those days have got to be behind us, because that job is arguably the hardest job in the company and arguably the most important job in the company if you really want to scale without limits, right? Because you can have amazing marketing. We have incredible marketing here. 70% of our sales are inbound, but there's limits to every single thing that you can do on inbound. There's limits to it all, and there's diminishing returns at a certain point. The only thing that has no limit is outbound. And for some reason, it's the role that we respect the least. It's the role that we pay the least attention to. We pay the least money to, and we try to rush people right out of the role so quickly. And we almost force people into it. We say, you want to be a salesperson, you have to pay your dues. You have to do this. I hate when people say that stuff because it just, you're framing the role in a way that, of course, no one's going to want to stay in it when you talk about it that way. And so I think that just the way we talk about it has to change. The way we compensate it has to change. The way we train and develop people has to change. That goes back to, and this is probably alongside compensation, this is the biggest piece. If we're expecting people to ramp up in 90 days, we're giving them half-ass training, we're not really investing in them, and we're pushing them through. Why would someone care enough to get really great at a job when they're going to leave it in 9 months after training? Who really cares about that? But if you're going to spend 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 years in the role, and you're going to earn 6 figures and have potential to grow, well, then now you've got a reason to really invest in getting great at the role. So I blabbed on a bit there, but those are my reasons.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I closed the question. I'm not sure why I popped up. I'm hoping Julia can do something with the questions here. So we'll get back to that. It'd be interesting to see if a company, and maybe there's one out there, paid as much, or I'd say a bit more, because we attach so much value to money. If the SDR role was actually paid more than the AE role, let's just do a little fun experiment. Would the SDR, would the meeting getter role not, I wouldn't say rainmaker,
Top
the
of funnel.
networking role,
I
top of
think we
funnel
changed.
role.
My dream is we change the titles, Aaron. I think we have account openers and we have account closers, and they split the commission, and that's it. And boom.
Yeah, would that change the prestige, right? Right, because if it earned more money,
Yeah.
So that again really skews our perspectives on like what people want to do.
Yep.
So and just be interesting.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of it could be really interesting to be in an SDR role, top of funnel door opener role for a few years if you really had the wherewithal to expand the way you did it and weren't treated as someone who kind of be a robot constantly.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think that people are undervaluing themselves in the marketplace, right? I'll tell you what I've never had, Aaron, in my career, or I'll start with what I've had a lot of. I have a lot of AEs, a lot of sales managers who come to me and they tell me how great they are and why I should pay a ton of money to hire them. I have never had someone come to me and brag about their success in opening opportunities at the top of funnel and tell me why I should pay them a lot of money to come here. And that would be a dream for most startups because we're all struggling in this area. Everyone needs top of funnel. If you can make yourself an expert and you can outperform the average, you have a lot of power to go out and demand a big salary and demand the comp package that you want because everyone needs that person. And whether it's the SDR or SDR leadership, both of those roles are incredibly hard to find really, really good talent in. And I think it's because people are not investing in themselves to become as good at it. They're investing in themselves to try to get out of that role as fast as possible. And that has all just led us to this place of where SDR orgs are generally struggling and they're not outperforming the AE role.
All right. So quick note, I've enabled something called question mode. So if you want to throw a question in the chat, we can start flagging them. There's so many chats going, but we can flag it for questions to be answered. So.
Oh, now I see the chats. I had that closed. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Do you want to pick one or you want me to pick one?
They're coming in. Do you want to pick one? Why don't you start?
If someone is good at their job at opening top of the funnel, why would they switch companies? It's a fallacy. And that comes from Nathan, I'm going to say for short. If someone is good at their jobs, opening top of the funnel, why would they switch companies? It's a fallacy. I would say that they're probably switching companies for one of two reasons. One is they think they need to become an AE and they're trying to find that role. Another is they probably want to earn more money, if I'm understanding where you're going with that question. I think we need to get to a place where people don't want to switch companies because they have a career path where they can stay in the role and just keep crushing it.
Yep. I will point out that the idea of a parallel top of funnel job makes a lot more sense. I think it's an easier in kind of like that transactional environment.
Yeah.
If you start to think about going up market to enterprise sales or people doing like mid 5-figure, 6-figure and up sales, where you do need a lot of closing experience. You do need a lot more experience. Right. You can make a lot more, $500,000. I mean, or higher. There's a lot of barriers. We're trying to imagine an SDR to get paid $600,000 a year. Someone probably does in special situations, but wouldn't be a standard. And also the amount of experience. So again, keep everyone, but it actually, I could see it making a lot of sense for some companies in a lot of spaces, the openers and the closers.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to like my first job where it was full cycle and our VP of sales did not believe in having SDRs. He wanted everyone responsible for their own pipeline. And in that particular company, it made a lot of sense because it was so transactional. The service cost $50 a month, right? We were just signing up restaurants for a real simple service. But because the SDR job outreach has gotten so complex, you need the specialization. So that's where I disagree with all the people who say, predictable revenue is broken or SDR is broken. You got to go back to full cycle. Like, no, that is not the answer. It sounds great on the surface, but if you're actually working in sales leadership and you try to do that, you realize it's a nightmare. You'd be teaching someone way too many different things. But yeah, I think it's interesting, right? If you if you have, you pair people up or however you do it, pods, no pods. But yeah, do they just have equal salaries? Do they just split the comp and one person's really, really great at running that demo and managing the close, and the other person's really great at opening up those opportunities?
I published one question. If you can't see it, what it says is, how do we convince CEOs and executives to pay our SDRs a compensation that lines up with their value? Collin, you're an executive.
I am working on convincing my CEO of that in the current time. So I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm basically answering his question, which is how do we get our SDRs to hit 100% of quota?
Justify it.
Right?
Actually,
Yeah.
so we might have skipped over, in case people didn't see it, your VP of sales, right, at AirCall.
Yes.
And AirCall, how would you, and we talked about, you referred to it's a challenging market, but can you describe it for people here?
Yeah, sure. So AirCall is a cloud-based phone system for teams. We focus mostly on selling to sales and support teams. We are largely focused on, I would say, SMB and mid-market. We look for accounts that are generally less than 200 users. Really, the 50 to 100 users is our sweet spot today. And we're very quite transactional, a lot of inbound sales. We're selling up against all the phone systems that you guys use today. So there's a lot of them. It's a very crowded market, and what's interesting about it is the industry is so big and the market is so massive. But even though there's so much competition and there's companies that have raised tons and tons of money and built really cool tech, generally customers are just not happy with their phone system. It's a tool that I found that they are probably most picky about, and they hold it to the highest of standards, because if you have one problem on a phone call, you're all of a sudden really mad at that tool, more so than probably any other tool that might have a bug or a problem or whatnot, because you're communicating with a prospect or with your customer. So that in and of itself makes the industry really exciting for me, because there's this enormous demand for it and people are always looking for something better. And so it puts us in a cool position to focus mostly on how do we show them that we're better. But yeah, so that's
it is it's a rip and replace market for the most part. It's a lot harder to sell systems as someone who has to get rid of the current system.
Correct.
So you and this is one of the reasons we did the whole nail the niche section in the Impossible book, which was the sequel to Predictable Revenue, because the most common challenge that people had building an outbound team was nailing a niche, the right target, the right message, compelling reasons, because the market you're in and how differentiated you are and deal sizes, a lot of that really affects, it's kind of like the soil you're in as to how hard or easy an SDR, it's not just SDRs, it's kind of all lead gen, but how challenging or not an outbound model is. And so you're, to some extent, in a more challenging soil.
For outbound particularly, I would say we're in a relatively easier area for inbound, because everyone is searching the internet for these solutions. So our marketing team has a field day, and it's really successful. But doing the cold outreach for us, what's really challenging is people are stuck in contracts. They maybe, even if we get them on the phone, they say they hate their phone system. They're often stuck in 1 or 2 or 3 year contracts. And so for us, a lot of that game is keeping that follow-up and staying in touch with them. And that, again, is, if you come in as an SDR and you're just starting to create your pipeline and you're getting callback dates in 6 months or 9 months, that alone slows up your ramp period, right? So there's those factors betting against us as well.
All right, here, let me pick another question to publish.
Okay. By the way, Barbara, you said I love Collin. I love you too, Barbara.
Okay, meetings booked versus meeting completed. Actually, the answer is neither. And there's a couple other, there's the chat around comp. Okay, so the answer here in terms of there's really 2 metrics. Again, depends on, but usually there's 2 metrics you want to comp outbound SDRs on. That is the number of sales accepted opportunities, just sales accepted leads, which is defined as the salesperson accepting it says they're going to take it. So
Yeah, we
they're
call it
still here.
qualified here, but I think it's the same criteria you're talking about.
All right. So what that means is there could have been a meeting booked that doesn't happen.
Right.
All right. So meeting booked doesn't mean completed, but did it go well or not? So it went well, and it's worth basically the salesperson's time to take it. So I'm taking the baton. So everyone's criteria varies a bit, but generally it means that there's someone of influence, there's some power there. They have a relevant need and they're interested in the next step.
Yeah.
So that is, and the metric is, again, sales qualified leads, sales accepted, whatever that means. And then the second part that should be measured is revenue. Now there's sometimes complexities. If you can tie SDRs to revenue, it's great, but 50% tied to the number of sales accepted leads per month. So 50% of the variable commission, this is kind of like baseline to the SQL attainment, and half of the variable tied to revenue if possible. All right, so this is the comp question. Again, part of this is one of the biggest problems with outbound teams is inaccurate metrics. So if you really look under the covers of the metrics, like what do you really have? There's usually too much optimism with pipeline. There's oftentimes inaccurate revenue metrics because a lot of the deals credited to outbound didn't come from actual outbound. So this is one of the places that you not only need to measure the sales qualified leads, but actually need an audit process. And it's not because people will game the system, but I find that people need so much, go back to your original point, coaching and practice and training. They get things wrong all the time with what's qualified, which means not just, it's the SDR and the salesperson. So having an audit process to review all those creates consistency around what's been qualified and what hasn't. That means you have a better quality of or accuracy of your pipeline metrics.
Who do you think owns that process, Aaron? That's an interesting idea. We don't have that today. We have, so our AEs really serve as the auditor, so to speak, when we train them and we trust them on it. But
no, you can't. Sorry. They're just too, and it's not their fault because it's not their main job. We could do a whole thing on this, but let's say it's one of the top 6 issues. So usually it could be like one of the SDR managers. As long as they're not paid, as long as their incentives aren't tied to directly, you want someone who could be more neutral. So I did it at Salesforce a long time ago. A sales ops person.
That's what I was thinking, sales ops.
Yeah, typically. It's not hard. It doesn't actually take that much time, but you need someone who kind of knows the process, can do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's the consistency and coaching opportunities, because a lot of people just put it in wrong.
Yeah.
Or they miss things.
What we do. Sorry.
Sometimes one place you do want to catch, for example, salespeople who are trying to do favors for their prospector who they know are working hard.
Yes.
So there's a lot of reasons to do it, but you need to do it.
What we do, because we've seen that problem. The SDR is one deal away from their goal, and they push on the AE. Yeah. Come on, qualify this. So what we do here. And I don't know how well this will continue to scale. We've had some really senior AEs who are very loyal to companies. They've been pretty good about that, so we've gotten away with it. But we do track. So we're tracking the qualification rate that an AE gives for outbound deals, and then we're also tracking the closing rate. So if we see that, hey, their closing rate is significantly lower on their outbound deals than it should be, then we know they're probably being a little bit too generous with qualification. So we're tracking it that way, but I think your point's interesting because we're only checking it after the problem has happened, and it sounds like having someone audit that, you can catch that sooner.
Yeah, I'm publishing one more. It's the same thing, which is why read here. You wouldn't compensate on meetings held versus sales accepted opportunities.
Right.
The one exception, though, is in the early days of the team when you don't have a track record yet and you're not really sure what the actual attainment can be. It can make sense to pay people on interim metrics like certain activity levels or meetings booked or meetings held while you're still building this confidence in what they should be accomplishing on the, here SAO again means sales accepted opportunity. It's this other version of sales qualified lead. So in special situations, but otherwise you don't want to pay for meetings held unless you have a really, really compelling reason to do it.
Agreed.
Yeah. So the way comp is defined, again, it's like you'll get what you pay for. If you pay people for activities, you'll get activities, which may not be results. The only reason, so one quick story, Salesforce.com, the last I talked to them, they had changed their comp structures to the outbound SDRs, which they think they call BDRs now, only get paid on revenue. And yes, they still have a multi-month sales cycle, but the reason they did that was because to totally create total focus on what closes. They said when they did that, it immediately changed people's behavior to focus on only deals that would close. And they can do that because they have so much of a track record for a BDR. When you start, for the first 3 months, you see X, and for the next 3 months, you see Y, and then you start making extra money at Z. So they could create enough of a kind of a prediction for people's comp.
Yeah.
They didn't have to pay people on accepted opportunities month to month. But
That's
I think
really
that's going to be a rare it's going to be a
Yeah.
more rare situation.
Yeah, at my last company, when I first started building out the org, we were only paying on closed deals, and yet it didn't scale very well. It was great in the beginning because it was really small, right? We had 2 AEs and they were killers. They would close at the same rate every single time. But as we started adding newer AEs who maybe drop the ball or they screw up and they blow a good op, that's where it was a problem and wasn't fair to the SDRs that way.
Yep. So I'm saying I feel like one of the most common mistakes. So let me just, since we're here, I'm going to throw out another super common mistake. I'm going to use the word territories just because it's so common, or segments, right? So round robin for outbound, okay? That's just not a good idea. And then I can explain why if we need to, but don't do round robin. Again, unless it's like a very interim, very special situation for a very compelling reason. Otherwise, you need some kinds of segments or territories, and to be matched with, I would say, no more than 3 or 4 salespeople. So one outbound SDR, if they support more than 3 or 4, they get too spread thin and too scattered. So common mistakes. And last one, just for now.
Can we dive into that for a second? I'm curious. So we don't do territories here. It's a topic we've talked a lot about.
Oh, my friend.
So I want to dive into that. Why? And when you say territories, do you mean geographically? Do you mean different cities owned by different SDRs?
Well, I really talk about segmenting, because territories sometimes can be geographic or other. Could be by industry, could be by size.
Yep.
But you have to divide people up so they've got specific, sort of market segments to go after. Otherwise, it's too overwhelming, and they don't. So there's reasons. In fact, while we do this, I'll try to pull up a little sheet I've got.
Do you see the benefit to this is mostly, because I'll tell you the reason that we have been talking about potentially moving that direction is as we've grown the SDR team, our process, let me back up. Our process has been, we have very set criteria that they should be looking for ICP. They use, they use Salesforce to see if someone already owns the opportunity. If it hasn't been touched in 30 days, it's up for grabs. And it worked really well when the team was small. As we've gotten bigger, they're spending a larger portion of their time just going into Salesforce and seeing if somebody owns it. So the advantage that I see, and I'm curious if this is what you're getting at, is it just speeds up that process. If you own your domain, whether it's an industry or a specific city or whatnot, you can narrow down your search and save a lot of time in finding ops that maybe someone else is working. Is that where you're going with it?
Yeah, well, on one hand, here we go. I want to thank you. Oops, I'm trying to get someone to post this. There we go. Okay, thank you, Griffin. It creates focus for the reps, both SDRs and AEs. Again, this could be by geo, by industry, by type of technology used. There's lots of ways to divide. It's about dividing and conquering. So it creates focus for them. It removes a lot of the stepping on toes that happens. It removes a lot of the busy work and searching for who owns what. It also creates opportunity for more teamwork and collaboration, because if you have an SDR that works Connecticut and an AE that works Connecticut and a customer success manager that works Connecticut and a global director that works Connecticut, you've got this kind of, it's easier for the people to form small teams to work specific segments, or financial, for insurers, right? You've got people that kind of focus on that. When you don't have territories, what happens is there's all this, whose lead is that? There's all this bickering and really infighting around who owns what, and a lot of confusion, and not nearly as much teamwork. There's not as much collaboration and people helping each other, from what I've seen. And I would say that lastly, territories are a huge, huge pain in the ass.
That's why we stay away from them.
But it's a better pain in the ass than not having them.
It's interesting. You're making me think here. So let me challenge you a little bit on the reasons I've resisted to it. I think you just announced one of them. They're a huge pain in the ass in a nutshell, right? What I've always aimed towards doing, and you've got me thinking again, maybe I'm just wrong. I always aim for my top priority in building a sales team is having a culture of no excuses. And I require that of everyone who works here, that they never, ever, ever say an excuse or come at me with an excuse. You can come at me with a problem and you can have a proposed solution to it. And for me, it's critical to have a team that functions that way, so that we can focus on how we're going to make things happen and not focus on all of the things that we know can stop us from making things happen, because they exist, right? And so in expecting that from my team, I know that puts a responsibility on me as their leader to put them in scenarios and in an environment where I am aiming towards them not having excuses. And so territories for me has always been one of those things that I have felt I would be the guilty one if I required it of them, because there could be a very valid excuse to say, I'm performing at a lower pace than the person next to me simply because my territory isn't as good. And so that's my main reason that I have avoided that. But did when you see people working territories, I mean, is that a common thing? Is that why you say it's a pain in the ass, that people are, how do you make it sure that it's fair?
Well, you can't totally, but nothing's fair. So, I don't have like a published thing on this, but this is kind of this stock, not stock, but when I do assessments of people's outbound teams, if they need territories, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I think that what you just said is a common one around you want things to be fair.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problems with territories. However, I think if people have territories, so these are some problems, right? Territories give
look at that
salespeople, right. And also, like you said, territories give pessimistic salespeople an excuse.
Yeah. Yep.
Or just anyone. But it's also a true excuse in some extent. But
exactly.
The SDR you get, like, if I could get a better SDR, you can't get the same SDR. Like, someone's going to get the best SDR, right? So it's not going to be fair. Also, territories, who owns what? There's all basically this idea of who owns what creates a lot of friction as the bigger the team gets. But I think this is really the point. But when you don't have territories, really things do run amok. People can't focus because, like, what's my list? What's my specialty? I don't own this certain patch of, if I do finance, I have a specialty. If I have Brooklyn, I've got a specialty. There's a lot more clarity of ownership there, and I can partner with other people or partners who specialize in that same specialty. So anyway, it's something that people have to have. I am not even that much of a fan on round robin. With inbound SDRs, a little bit different, but for outbound and salespeople, again, and there's lots of companies where it's geographic for some, like some salespeople have geo territories, some have industry territory segments. You kind of, based on the customer segment you're targeting, decide, how do we shape this segment? But you do need a way for them to, I guess, divide and conquer.
I think we're starting to play around with some of that stuff. But part of it, I think it comes with scale, right? Like we don't run into those problems when we have a team of less than 10 SDRs. We had just a really simple system. If the opportunity, the account exists in Salesforce, somebody's been active on it in the last 30 days, they own it. And so we actually don't see people fighting over that. To me, what the problem is that there's just a lot of time spent going into the system to see who owns it. And then they're like, oh crap, I just found this. Like, to me, that's the problem. And maybe we just have good people here and they get along and they follow the process. So they don't fight about it. To me, it's the efficiency that has me intrigued on the idea of segmenting or territories. And we're playing around with it a little bit. We're starting to do because one of the things we want to work on this year, and I know we're getting totally off of is the SDR Model Broken process, but this is all good stuff. We're playing around this year. We want to get more collaborative with marketing, and we realized last year that kind of our marketing team's off doing one thing and our outbound team's off doing another, and there's a lot of benefit to really aligning them, whether it's on targeting a specific city or targeting a specific vertical. And so mostly what we're looking at today is cities and verticals and starting to pair up, and then put together that targeted account list to the point that we're doing things like putting, so we did a cool program in New York City where we found on all the sides of all the old phone booths throughout the city, you can still purchase advertisements, and they're reasonably priced, and they're outside of all the subway stations. And so we said, let's find out the subway stations that is where the people are commuting, our target accounts. This is the subway station they're walking out of. This is how they're getting to work. And let's get air call ads all over the streets there while we're reaching out to them, prospecting them, calling them, emailing them, leaving voicemails, connecting on LinkedIn, so that they're seeing us, out on the streets. And so that stuff's been pretty cool that we just started doing.
I think that's great. It's like kind of going against the grain too.
Yeah.
So quickly, before I go back to wrap up in the last couple of questions, I mentioned before I forget, just really important, if you have inbound leads coming in and you're doing outbound prospecting, do not mix those roles into the same person. You have to have inbound SDRs and outbound SDRs, or else outbound will not work. And managers should really have no more than 10 reports. And even if it's like a new SDR team, it's probably more like 6 or 8. Like, really common problem.
Yes.
Because otherwise, the manager just doesn't have enough bandwidth to focus on process and do coaching and other things they need to do with the team.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron, how do you, I completely agree on segmenting inbound, outbound. How do you think inbound SDR should be compensated in comparison to outbound?
Well, there's a lot more variability with inbound because of many factors.
Yeah.
I still like, if it's a fast sales cycle, a few weeks, basically you can do it on revenue. If it's typically like a little bit longer, like a few weeks to several months, same thing. Half of the commission is tied to the number of qualified opportunities. And of course, that number is very different than for outbound. So similar comp structure to outbound, but the attainment goals. So, an inbound SDR might have a goal of 50 qualified. I'm just picking a number because, again, they can be totally different. So don't use this number.
Ours is 75 right now.
Yeah, it could be 75, while an outbound could be 8,
right?
Or 6. But the same basic structure, the quality opportunities plus some back end on what closes.
We've been brainstorming different ideas because, and part of, I think you just hit on it there, is like, what's the right quota? And the right quota for them is largely dependent on what the marketing spend is or how successful, our online acquisition team is doing in that given month. And so when we created, one of the first things I did when I started here a year ago was created the inbound SDR role. They actually had inbound leads going straight to AEs, which was horrible.
No,
they're on a demo and they take an hour or 3 hours. They only respond to the ones that feel good. It was the worst. So we made that change right away. And obviously the return on marketing is, went up a lot. But we have trying to figure out what that right quota is for them has been tough. And what I was thinking about is maybe the compensation for them is more about how fast are they getting in touch with the lead when it comes in, and what's their conversion after getting in touch with them. Because what they can't control is how many of those leads come in. That's really on our demand gen team. Problem is we don't have the best tracking on those things yet, so we haven't made a change, but curious what you would think of that if you're an inbound SDR and you're not being paid based on the quantity or the volume, but it's more because you're paying your marketing or demand gen team on that, but it's more you're paying the SDR, you're setting benchmarks. You got to get in touch with this lead in X number of time and then convert X percentage of them to a qualified op or a meeting. What do you think about that? Uh-oh, I think Aaron's camera has frozen. All right, folks, we lost Aaron, and it sounds like he's trying to come back in with his phone, but he might not be able to. So let's go through. Why don't we take? We're at 2:00 right now, and so we should be wrapping up right now anyway. Why don't I take 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up here. Peter, I don't know if this is a good question, but I'm going to read it and we'll go for it. Do you believe automated or semi-automated lead gen mechanisms make sense? Using lots of tools, support, and technologies like AI. I think what you're probably referring to are these tools like BDR.ai and whatnot. If you're talking about tools that kind of claim that they're replacing SDRs, and that they can personalize emails for you. No, I do not believe in them. I get emails that I know are sent from those, and I do not think that AI today can replace a human. I think it can help humans be more productive, but I do not believe in relying solely on robots to do your outbound prospecting. Alexis asks, how do you measure how granular AEs need to be, accepting meetings? How do you ensure they're not too picky? Great question, Alexis. So at AirCall, we have very specific criteria, and it's really simple. So the AE knows that we have a document that outlines exactly what our ICP is. And so when they do discovery, they have to make sure that the prospect fits our ICP. And then they also need to make sure that the prospect has said they are ready to make a buying decision within the next 6 months. 6 months is kind of an arbitrary number. We just chose it. That's what we do for inbound leads. For outbound, we say 12 months. If they're prepared to make a buying decision, meaning they're ready to change their phone system in the next 12 months for outbound, and they fit our ICP, then our AEs will mark it as qualified. And if they disqualify a lead, the way that we make sure that the AEs are following the process properly is our SDRs are always going to spot check that. So if an SDR tees up a demo and the AE says it's not qualified, chances are the SDR is going to be listening to that demo and see if the AE made the right call. All right, I'll take one more, and then we're going to wrap up because we're a few minutes over. Let's see.
Am I back?
Oh, Aaron's back. I was just about to take one last question. We took a couple questions while you were gone, and I was just about to wrap up.
I'll just say thank you to everyone. Yeah,
No
I'll just
problem.
say thanks. Let you wrap up.
Well, thank you, Aaron. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm curious. Do you have a summarized? Do you have a summarized conclusion or opinion on what I'm saying here to just kind of bring it back to the SDR model being broken? What are you seeing with companies that you're working with? Are you working with companies in similar scenarios in the SMB space, or was this idea that there's a problem with quota attainment? Was this foreign to you, or are you seeing that with companies you're working with?
Expectations are too high, and execution is harder than people realize.
Got it. So if you guys are missing Aaron's audio, he answered my question. Expectations are too high. Executing is harder than people realize. So I completely agree. And if you are interested, I guess, in continuing to follow the saga and stay up to date on any data that I will try to get together, or potentially participate in a survey. I think I'm going to send out one of my own surveys on LinkedIn and just let everyone participate. anonymously or whatever, so we can get some data around this. But just follow along on LinkedIn, and we'll keep you up to date with anything that we learn. Aaron, are you able to hear us so we can say goodbye to everyone, or have we lost your audio? You can. Okay.
I can't. I turned my video off. I'm sticking to chat.
Okay.
And thanks, Collin. Great topic.
Likewise,
Great
I had
discussion.
a good time.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and yeah, we'll hopefully talk soon on LinkedIn. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thanks, Collin. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.